Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1181. Even if the main battle is before us, I will still kill you. Gu Han hadn't had the chance to speak yet when a voice drifted over from the distance, filled with a mocking laugh. Explanation? An account? What kind of explanation? How do you want us to account to you? Even if they really died with remaining grievances, what of it? Who is it? Scram out here. Jun Moxie's expression turned exceedingly ugly. Gu Han also roared with rage. Who is it dressing up as God and playing as the devil? Show yourself. A shrill howl rang out in the wind, and several hundred people appeared outside the tent. The two people in the lead, dressed in white with golden hair crowns, looked disdainfully at the people inside the tent. Their eyes seemed to be filled with extreme arrogance as they fell on Jun Moxie. The crowd felt their eyes blur, and before they could see anything, Jun Moxie had already appeared outside the tent. A terrifying aura that was brutal to the extreme surrounded Jun Moxie as he stared aggressively at the group that had just arrived. Ever since he'd reincarnated into this world, Jun Moxie had never unleashed his killing intent so unreservedly before. In that moment, regardless of the people in the tent or outside of it, whether it was the people from the three holy lands or the evil monarch manor, everyone could clearly sense the unquenchable determination in Jun Moxie's heart. Right now, he was like a death god descended on the mortal world. Every move he made and every glance was filled with a deathly aura that would freeze the hearts of men. Gu Han felt a deathly chill surging from his heart, and he hurried out, standing before Jun Moxie. Right now, even a Saint Monarch expert like him could feel an indescribably dangerous feeling from Jun Moxie. This was an instinct from the soul when an extremely terrifying threat appeared. Gu Han had a feeling that right now, if there was just a single word that did not agree with Jun Moxie, it would instantly unleash a huge demon. All the people in this world, all the living beings of the universe, would not mean a single thing to him. What he wanted was simply an explanation, an account. All the talk about morals and the bigger picture were completely not in the evil monarch's consideration right now. The slightest disagreeable word would result in a slaughter. Annihilation. Who was it that spoke just now? Jun Moxie had a faint smile on his face, but his eyes were still blazing with extreme rage as he looked at the two newcomers. What explanation? What kind of account? Even if they really died with remaining grievances, what does it matter? Who spoke those words just now? Gu Han was extremely anxious right now. This bunch of damn bastards, not appearing when they were needed, and jumping out now when they shouldn't appear. They could have come earlier, or even later, but they had to arrive at this exact moment. And the moment they arrived, they uttered this kind of dastardly words that even Gu Han could not tolerate. These two were the Heaven Saint Palace's two other Saint Monarchs. Thunderclap Saint Monarch, Xia Changtian, Thunderbolt Saint Monarch, Ji Bo Wen. These two had guarded the battlefield of the war for seizing the heavens for over 3,000 years. And their cultivation was only a sliver short of Gu Han, a third-level Saint Monarch. In this era, and in the Xian continent, they were the true peak experts. The two's personality were overly extreme, and it was like second nature for them to be unreasonably defensive whether they were in the right or wrong, because of their obstinate and self-conceited tempers. They were not suitable to stay in the Heaven Saint Palace or even take on the leadership role of the Holy Lands, and so Gu Han had assigned them to guard the battlefield and temper their minds. One had to admit that Gu Han was truly a talent at allocating human capital. these two's personality weaknesses instead become a strong point when applied on the battlefield against the strange races that in these 3,000 years. An uncountable number of strange races experts had perished in their hands. To the rest of the Xian continent, these two could definitely be hailed as heroes. With their cultivation and close proximity to the grand battle, how could they not be aware? And so the moment Jun Moxie raised the question, Gu Han instantly knew that the source of this problem most likely stemmed from these two. The reason was very simple: these two had always looked down on Tianfa. To have the Xian beasts represent the Xian continent in battle was an enormous humiliation in their opinions. How could the safety of humans be placed in the hands of a bunch of wild beasts? Even if they won, it would be a huge disgrace. The humans who needed the protection of wild animals. Just the thought alone was too humiliating. At first, Gu Han was still thinking that it wouldn't be that bad if they didn't come out, waiting until the later battles to put in a bit of contribution. At most, he and the rest would just pay more attention to Tianfa's side, and this anger would be slowly resolved. But who would have imagined that they would actually appear here? This way, both sides would have their swords drawn, and there wouldn't be any grounds to reverse the situation. At the wrong time, at the wrong place, speaking the wrong words to the wrong person. The only result for such a combination of wrongs was an even wronger result. It was this, Daddy. What about it? The thunderclap Saint Monarch Xia Changtian stepped up and snorted as he looked at Jun Moxie. Little lad. Judging by your looks, you should be a human, not a Xian beast transformed into human form, right? Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes and stared icily at Xia Changtian as he replied, In this life, the people I hated the most were never my enemies. Everything that the enemy does, no matter how shameless, despicable, dirty, or underhanded, is only to be expected. I will only go and kill them, but I will not hate them. Those words were clearly irrelevant to the question asked, but everyone, no matter how far they were, could clearly feel the cold intent in those words. You probably hate us for not lending a hand, this old man knows it as well. A look of rage flared in Xia Changtian's eyes, but he still repressed his temper and snorted. You want to say that the people you hate the most in this world are those who watch from the side without helping? But have you thought of why this old man was only watching from the side? In this world, there's always a reason behind everything. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and chuckled coldly. No matter what reason you have, it's still the same. Preposterous. Xia Changtian snapped angrily. If not for the impending grand battle, this old man would slay you where you stand. Jun Moxie roared with laughter, his voice sharp to the extreme as he roared. Even with the impending grand battle, this daddy will still slay you where you stand. Xia Changtian's enraged eyes shrank. As he looked steadily at Jun Moxie for a long time, he did not move, and he finally said with a low voice, To think that you, as a human, do not even have the slightest bit of sense of a human. Do you know what the difference between Xian beasts and humans are? Jun Moxie closed his eyes, treating his words as empty air. Instead, he began to rouse his spiritual qi. Adjusting his body to its peak, this person's strength was inestimably deep, and his own cultivation was not sufficient. But no matter what, this person was dead for sure today. He must die. Xia Changtian nearly exploded from anger. If not for that glance from Gu Han, he would very likely have lost his temper. This young evil monarch was simply too lawless. With the kind of status that this old man has, to be willing to come down to his level and explain to him, is already giving him a huge amount of face. But this kid actually closed his eyes. Absolutely intolerable. Back when the continent was founded, Xian beasts were merely the mounts of us humans. Xia Changtian said with an angry harumph. And now, tens of thousands of years later, these mere animals actually have the gall to take on the forms of humans and even participate in the war for seizing the heavens. Isn't this a colossal joke? Jun Moxie's eyes remained close and he didn't respond. We humans are the lords of all creatures, how can those simple Xian beasts stand equally with us? And now, you actually outrightly call those animals your brothers. Could it be that you've already reached a point where you are now willing to give up your pride as a human and become a Xian beast? Xia Changtian continued. One must never forget that our ancestors are humans. At this point, Mei Shuaiyan's eyes were already on the verge of spewing fire. And she could not endure any longer. Tiger King and Bear King had also stood up with rage, ready to start a fight. Only Long Crane was holding them back with all his might. Brother-in-law is here. Let's wait for brother-in-law to deal with this. Jun Moxie finally opened his eyes slowly. Are you done speaking? Xia Changtian snorted coldly. What are you intending to do? If you're done speaking, let's begin. Jun Moxie swept his eyes coldly across the 300 people in front of him as he asked emotionlessly. I wonder how many of you people insisted on watching by the side. If you have the guts, why don't you step out? Allow me to broaden my horizons. How presumptuous! Xia Changtian roared with rage. Jun Moxie, you're courting death. Gu Han hurriedly stood between the two. His face was contorted as a bitter gourd, shaking his hands rapidly. He said, the grand battle is right upon us. The both of you, just say a few words less. AI. The situation is already so precarious. Must we also wield blades at each other? I don't want to fight among ourselves either. But it's this evil monarch that you'd invited that is pushing people too far. Xia Changtian snorted. Leader Gu, I demand an explanation for this matter. Explanation? Gu Han nearly fainted. All of a sudden, he roared. What kind of explanation do you want from me? What were you doing when our allied troops were fighting in a desperate battle? Why hadn't you come to assist them? And now, when they are asking you about it, not only did you not admit your mistake, you still demand an explanation from me? What explanation do you want? Those mere Xian beasts do not deserve our saving. It would just be a waste of our forces. Xia Changtian retorted stubbornly. Even without them, we've already held off the strange races by ourselves for 10,000 years. But since they'd come here, they were still useful as cannon fodder to reduce the ranks of our enemies. You! Gu Han was so angry that he couldn't catch his breath. This is a crisis that concerns the lives of the entire continent. And you actually held on to this kind of narrow-minded thinking even at this time. If we lose, this will be a tragedy upon every living being in this continent. Xia Changtian, you've disappointed me too deeply. That was 8 powerful Saint Venerables. 5,000 saints and Saint Emperors are to be sacrificed this needlessly. Why you? We will not lose this fight. Xia Changtian shot back in disdain. This old man has already fought the strange races for 3,000 years. Don't I still know them well enough? For the last 3,000 years. When had they ever managed to cross the Pillar of Heaven's mountains under my watch? But the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is already gone now. Gu Han roared. Can you wake up to the situation right now? What is the use of that useless stubbornness? Shut up. A shout broke through the air, interrupting the two's argument. Gu Han and Xia Changtian both froze. None of them had thought that there would be a person who would dare to interrupt them while the two of them spoke. That shout was naturally from Jun Moxie.as. The two looked at him with disbelief. Jun Moxie simply continued in an emotionless manner. I have no interest in listening to your arguments. Right now, those people who also refuse to provide assistance, please step out on your own. I do not wish to kill wrongfully. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1182. Trump cards revealed. Disregarding everything. You don't wish to kill wrongfully? Xia Changtian laughed aloud and said with a sneer. So, you were planning to kill all of us otherwise? What's so strange about killing you? Jun Moxie chuckled. This seat wants to see that since you all dared to do it, would you dare to step out? Huh. What's there to not dare? This old man shall be the first to do so. Xia Changtian took a wide step forward as he wore a challenging look on his face. This matter was indeed done by this old man. Yes. We saw a battle here. A very intense battle. But this old man simply refused to lend my aid. And I did not allow anyone to lend their aid. So, how do you intend to obtain justice? Beside him, the thunderclap Saint Monarch Xuan also scoffed coldly and took a step forward. This old man also did not approve of using our forces to help a bunch of Xian beasts. Allies? Comrades? They are still not deserving of that. If Manor Lord Jun wishes to seek justice on their behalf, you may count this old man in. The two of them looked at Jun Moxie, their faces filled with mockery and derision. And us as well. Behind the two, another 45 stepped out. All of them were sneering coldly, clearly treating this evil monarch as a joke. Punishment? That was truly too amusing. Who was capable of administering punishment to 2 saint monarchs, 5 saint venerables, more than 20 saint emperors and 20 saints? This was half of Heaven Saint Palace's strength right now. Who would dare to kill them? The law has no use if everyone was a criminal. Moreover, you're just a tiny little evil monarch. What qualifications do you have to deal with us? Do you have that ability? We're people who have guarded the continent for thousands of years. We're heroes who've contributed immensely to the continent. How much has a young brat like you done for the people? Now, because of a few filthy beasts, you want to punish us? Kill us? Utterly laughable. Seeing so many people stepping out, Gu Han's heart sank, all the way to the bottom. He felt his vision darkening, and his body swayed. He knew right then that this matter had already become completely unsalvageable. It was too serious. After this period of observation, he'd already gained an understanding of Jun Moxie's temper. This was a fellow that would never bend under threats. If it was anyone else, they would definitely give at least a thought to the bigger picture in such a situation, choosing to leave the matter for later. Even if they lost some face in the moment, it was inevitable. But was Jun Moxie this kind of person? His personality was the kind that became even more unyielding when forced. To use this kind of method to threaten him would instead result in the opposite result. Gu Han sighed heavily from the bottom of his heart. If these people came out with a random reason, such as they were stuck and truly unable to leave and then made a sincere apology, there would still be a chance of this matter subsiding peacefully. Even if Jun Moxie wanted to settle the scores in the future, it wouldn't be here or now. But right now, with so many people standing out, this matter had reached a completely irreversible state. Gu Han knew that Jun Moxie definitely had his own reason for coming to this battlefield. However, it definitely had nothing to do with the lives of the common people. And it was even more impossible to be for the sake of the Holy Lands. If he was really forced to the extreme end, this fellow would definitely disregard all prices and even the fate of the continent, to exact revenge for his brothers. Against such an unyielding knife, the correct method to deal with it would be a soft approach, but now, this bunch of idiots had actually pushed things to such a state. The 47 experts crossed their arms and stared at Jun Moxie with provocation. We're humiliating you. So what? We didn't reinforce you. So what? Do you really dare to fight? Starting a fight here would mean the destruction and decimation of the world. With just you, Jun Moxie, are you capable of bearing responsibility for it? If anything bad happens now, you will be greatest sinner of the continent. You want to act pitiful to gain the sympathy of the crowd? You want to seek an explanation from us? Brat, you're dreaming. Gu Han looked at their expressions, managing to guess their thoughts. At this moment, apart from Mo Wu Dao, all of them were sighing heavily, speechless. Are you people idiots? You really think that because you've had great contributions? When has this Jun Moxie ever cared about the fate of the continent? As for being a sinner, he would care even less about such a useless thing. He does whatever he likes. That is Jun Moxie. You people are playing with fire. But it's hard to blame them. Xia Changtian and the rest didn't know what kind of person Jun Moxie was. If they knew about what this kid had done in the past, they definitely wouldn't have acted so harshly. If they knew that this Jun Moxie had once taken on the curses of the world for Guan Qinghan's sake, Xia Changtian definitely would not choose this method. Moreover, Jun Moxie was not even forced by anyone at that time, and he'd still gone that far. Right now, he probably cared about even less. Are there any more? A queer smile surfaced on Jun Moxie's face as he asked in a calm manner. Everyone remaining simply exchanged a glance. But nobody stood out anymore. Demon pupil Saint Leng Tong stood within the troop, his face filled with anger. Their side had naturally heard the commotion from this battle. And there were even people who sat down to watch it, but when they brought up the matter of providing assistance, they were only met with the emotionless scoldings of the two saint monarchs. There were even some people that suffered quite badly because of their insistence to help. Now that things had developed to such a state, they also felt incredibly guilty and anxious in their hearts. But if they started an internal battle at this kind of time, then it definitely wouldn't be a good thing. After all, the safety of the entire continent could be thrown into the fire because of this. Leng Tong had also mentioned this possibility before, but the two saint monarchs had completely disregarded his words. What a grand lineup! Jun Moxie laughed aloud and suddenly stepped out. Clang! The sharp cry of a sword rang out, and a dazzling metallic light appeared. Seemingly having tunneled out of the void, this sword shone with a beautiful luster, floating quietly in the sky. The volcanoes around them continued to spew fire high into the sky, and the temperature here had reached incredible heights. But the instant this sword appeared, the temperature dropped greatly. Furthermore, a bone-freezing frost intent slowly emanated outwards. Even without moving, this sword attracted the gazes of the masses. Gu Han nearly gasped aloud. This sword was the same one that had appeared in the fight against Zhan Luanhui. The strength of this sword was something that even Gu Han was fearful of. The instant this sword came out, all the hope in Gu Han's heart was completely extinguished and turned into despair. The continent is finished. Jun Moxie had already decided to kill. This fight was inevitable. No matter who came out on top in this fight, the loser would still be the people of the continent. Their strength was already lacking against the numbers of the strange races. With this incident right now, there were no longer any more hope. They would lose without a doubt. Good sword. Thunderclap Saint Monarch Xia Chang Tian gasped and his eyes shone with shock. Looks like you're really determined to pursue this all the way to the end today. The millions of lives of the continent. The safety of the entire continent. They don't mean anything to you at all? The safety of the continent. The lives of the people, Kiki. Ha ha ha. Jun Moxie mumbled and roared with laughter. My brothers come here exactly for the sake of the continent and the people. But my brothers didn't see a single reinforcement from the people, even after they died fighting. When my brothers were fighting valiantly, sacrificing their blood, sweat, tears, until they were cut and hammered into pieces, the world were simply standing by the side and watching the show with interest. Ha ha ha. Jun Moxie laughed in a crazy manner until tears flowed from his eyes. And now? You want to talk to me about the continent? About the people? Xia Chang Tian. Don't you have any shame? Xia Chang Tian and Ji Bo Wen exchanged a look, understanding the meaning in each other's eyes. We've made a misjudgment. They naturally did not place a mere Jun Moxie in their eyes, but the impact of this battle was too huge. There were over 10,000 Tian Fa warriors here. And they were all experts. If this fight really started, it would be extremely terrible. At that time, the strange races wouldn't need to do anything, and the world would already be doomed. Originally, they thought that this word, people, would cause Jun Moxie to have some reservations and wouldn't really do anything, but now, they realized that they'd made a misjudgment. Manor Lord Jun. May you allow this old man to put in a few words? Gu Han sighed heavily, and before Jun Moxie could reply, he hurriedly continued. It is not auspicious to fight among ourselves before the main battle. Today's matter. Please take it as giving this old man some face. And we let it be for the time being. Xia Chang Tian and these guys had erred. But we still need them for the main battle. Why don't we let them redeem themselves on the battlefield and atone for their sins with the blood of our enemies? After this war for seizing the heavens, this old man will definitely give Manor Lord Jun a satisfactory explanation, even if I have to throw my old life away. No. Jun Moxie shook his head unyieldingly. My brother has already died here. And his soul is not even far. He's looking at me, waiting for me to give him justice. I do not wish to keep him waiting. Manor Lord Jun, please reconsider. Gu Han stepped forward anxiously. Gu Han, if you cannot bear to part with your brothers, you can join hands with them to deal with me. Even if your 3 holy lands and the Heaven Saint Palace joins forces today, I, Jun Moxie, will still take all of you on. It doesn't matter. Jun Moxie scoffed coldly and continued. However, if these people do not die today, my heart will never be at ease. For the sake of the common people, can you endure it this one time? Gu Han begged again. I, Jun Moxie, hereby swear. Jun Moxie smiled coldly as he suddenly declared in a maniacal tone. From today onwards, whoever dares to speak of the common people in front of me again shall die. Gu Han's face was completely flushed red with anxiousness as he stood before Jun Moxie, refusing to let him through. Step aside. Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes. I'll count to 3. If you don't step aside by then, I will immediately send down the orders. And the entire Tian Fa force here will immediately begin a battle to the death with the 3 holy lands right now. Gu Han's body shook visibly, but he couldn't say anything. He believed that Jun Moxie definitely capable of doing that. This evil monarch was not someone who could be judged with common sense. 1. Jun Moxie uttered coldly. At the same time, blood of yellow flame danced in the air, letting out small whoops of joy. 2. Jun Moxie's eyes were as cold as ice. Completely emotionless, the blood of yellow flame also turned around, pointing straight at Gu Han. Gu Han's face contorted, and sweat poured down his face. Jun Moxie could disregard the world, but he couldn't. 3. Jun Moxie suddenly roared. Everyone, hear my orders. Yes. Mei Shuayan, Bear King, Tiger King, Crane King, Solitary Eagle, and Feng Wanyan all stepped forward at the same time. Jun Moxie raised his hands authoritatively and commanded. Unsheath your weapons. Today, everyone from the 3 holy lands will be. Wait. Before Jun Moxie could say the word killed, Gu Han stopped him and his body trembled heavily. This old man will step aside. After saying that, he instructed. People of the 3 holy lands, do not make any rash movements. Follow me to the side. If anyone acts rashly, kill without mercy. As the command rang out, the people from the 3 holy lands instantly backed away. This time, they were all filled with fear as they looked at Jun Moxie's eyes. This fellow really dares awe. Right now, only the original 47 people were still left on the battlefield, facing Jun Moxie alone. Xia Changtian, Ji Bo Wen. Jun Moxie roared. You will use your decapitated heads as an explanation. Little Eagle, my departed brothers, may your departed souls watch as I obtain justice for you. A shrill howl rang out in the sky, and as Jun Moxie's voice rang out, it became a roar to kill. Presumptuous brat. This daddy would like to see who will take whose head. Xia Changtian snorted mockingly. All of you, back off. This old man will like to see the skills of this evil monarch myself. No one may leave. All those who refuse to render help shall all die. As those words landed, Jun Moxie's body soared to the sky. All of a sudden, countless cold and gleaming swords appeared in the sky. 9 nether frost blades. In the center, blood of yellow flame lit up the sky. Yin Yang escape art. Jun Moxie mumbled and suddenly disappeared without a trace, causing Xia Changtian, who was readying a technique, to lose his target. Power of the 5 elements. Be unleashed. He mumbled again. All of a sudden, countless fire dragons appeared in the sky, wrapping around the entire battlefield. The scorching flames caused the entire area to warp from the heat waves. Countless water droplets on the ground were sucked into the air. On the ground, a huge pit several hundred zhang wide, deeper than the eye could see, suddenly appeared on the ground with a heavy rumble. Xia Changtian and the rest, along with a large number of people, instantly fell into the pit, taken by surprise. A metallic light suddenly flashed around the walls of the pit. Power of gold. Fortify. Following that, Jun Moxie, who was hidden in the void, suddenly roared wildly, and the sky darkened. Countless black flames fell down from the sky, like beautiful black snow, enveloping an area of several hundred zhang, perfectly covering the whole of the large pit. The flame of primal chaos. This was the first time that Jun Moxie had exposed all his trump cards at once to kill. Here, for his fallen brother, he was attacking with full force without concern of the consequences. A truly wild and insane counterattack. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1183. Power of the 5 elements. Overturning the sky and earth. Since you refuse to give me an explanation, I will have to claim them myself. This explanation. Even if the mountains fall and the earth breaks apart, Even if the universe collapses and humanity become extinct, I will still take what I'm owed. The justice that my brothers are owed has nothing to do with the fate of the world. The lives of the people will be doomed. That was not because of me. Even if the world goes to hell, this daddy will still do what should be done. And this matter right now is something that I should do. Xia Changtian saw that Gu Han and the rest were not willing to assist them, and they felt exceedingly angry and anxious. Could it be that we had truly been in the wrong this time? Seeing how relentless Jun Moxie was, completely disregarding the big picture, although they were incredibly enraged, they still didn't pay much mind to the situation. The previous battle had greatly sapped Tian Fa's strength. 8 Saint Venerables had fallen, along with 80% of their 6,000 fierce warriors. Right now, only Jun Moxie and Mei Shuayan had Saint Venerable level standards of strength, along with one newly advanced Saint Venerable Big Bear. The others were only Saint Emperors at best, although they only had less than 50 people on their side. Even their weakest was at the Saint Realm. Jun Moxie and himself were third-level Saint Monarchs, and although it couldn't be compared with Gu Han's cultivation of peak third-level Saint Monarch, it was still a completely different level from Jun Moxie's side. As long as they paid special attention to the Tian Fa Xian Beast's self-detonation attacks, everything would still be within their grasp. Even if they annihilated Tian Fa first before dealing with the strange races. Although this pit was wide, and everyone was a peak expert with great experience and did not panic despite the many changes, they still did not manage to escape in time before they were carried away by the water torrent that appeared out of nowhere. In that moment, everyone felt as though they were in a dream. No matter how strong their minds were, they still felt greatly alarmed. This matter was too strange and too sudden, completely exceeding their expectations of something that could happen in this world. Everything seemed too unrealistic. They had clearly been standing on a patch of empty ground. Where did the fire suddenly come from? Since there was fire, there should be something that triggered the fire, right? But there clearly aren't any fire-inducing objects here at all. But if one said that that was just an illusion, it would be a colossal joke. When were there such realistic illusions in the world? The feeling of the fire on their skins was definitely not an illusion. As for the water, the clouds in the sky were being swept by powerful winds at extreme speeds. How could it stop to accumulate and send down water? But if it didn't rain, where did the water come from? Besides, even if it did rain, it shouldn't be so heavy and packed. With a loud boom, all the experts were smashed into the pit. Of the 47 peak cultivators, aside from the 2 Saint Monarchs, 3 Saint Venerables and 2 4th-level Saint Emperors, the others were all flushed into the pit. It wasn't that a person with higher cultivation would have stronger abilities when adapting to sudden changes. The truth was that those who managed to remain standing were those who did not panic under pressure. The moment one's heart was flustered, their abilities to handle changes would drop drastically. 2 of the people who were flushed down were Saint Venerable experts. Although this pit was wide, and everyone was a peak expert with great experience and did not panic despite the many changes, they still did not manage to escape in time before they were carried away by the water torrent that appeared out of nowhere. In that moment, everyone felt as though they were in a dream. No matter how strong their minds were, they still felt greatly alarmed. This matter was too strange and too sudden, completely exceeding their expectations of something that could happen in this world. Everything seemed too unrealistic. They had clearly been standing on a patch of empty ground. Where did the fire suddenly come from? Since there was fire, there should be something that triggered the fire, right? But there clearly aren't any fire-inducing objects here at all. But if one said that that was just an illusion, it would be a colossal joke. When were there such realistic illusions in the world? The feeling of the fire on their skins was definitely not an illusion. As for the water, the clouds in the sky were being swept by powerful winds at extreme speeds. How could it stop to accumulate and send down water? But if it didn't rain, where did the water come from? Besides, even if it did rain, it shouldn't be so heavy and packed. With a loud boom, all the experts were smashed into the pit. Of the 47 peak cultivators, aside from the 2 Saint Monarchs, 3 Saint Venerables and 2 4th-level Saint Emperors, the others were all flushed into the pit. It wasn't that a person with higher cultivation would have stronger abilities when adapting to sudden changes. The truth was that those who managed to remain standing were those who did not panic under pressure the moment one's heart was flustered. Their abilities to handle changes would drop drastically. 2 of the people who were flushed down were Saint Venerable experts. Dropped. Water continued to flood into the pit. Even more amazing was that the several hundred underground wells also suddenly exploded. Their water combining together and gushing out, with water coming from the top and bottom. The pit looked like an ocean in the middle of a huge tornado. The sound that came from that was also like thunder to the ears. All the experts stationed on the mountain were veterans who'd experienced hundreds of battles. What kind of horrors had they not seen? Although they had fallen into a dangerous situation because of a momentary mistake, it didn't mean that they would lie down and die. They would use all their means to try and escape. Some tried to directly charge upwards and get out. But the water pouring down was too heavy and strong. Some tried to bash a path through the walls. But they found to their dismay that despite their best efforts, they could only make a dent about half a zhang deep. The walls of this pit were actually even harder than steel. This was clearly just a regular ground a moment ago. Ah! How did everything change all of a sudden? Some experts simply found a spot to sit down and meditate, treating everything before them as the evil monarch's illusory tricks. As long as they ignored the illusions, then no matter how mighty it seemed, it would still just dissipate naturally. One had to admit that this method was indeed the most effective at countering illusions and heart demons, but when their skin was filled with boils and their clothes were burnt away by the fire, they realized to their dismay that this wasn't an illusion. Ah! All of this was real. And the fire could really burn people to death. The crowd soon realized that while the water was not weak, and the fire was not small, it was only enough to hinder them. It was still far from being enough to kill them, although the water was deep. It wouldn't be able to drown so many experts. As long as they used breath-holding techniques, it wouldn't be difficult to stay alive even if they were trapped underwater for half a month. The fire was indeed capable of burning people to death. But that was just for ordinary people. These peak experts. The fire didn't mean that much. Most. Their clothes, hair, eyebrows and body hair would be burned away. But it wouldn't do them much harm. A moment later, their heads surfaced from the water. Right now, the only problem left was how they should go back up, even if the pit was deeper. And the earth was harder. Could it hold so many Saint Venerables and Saint Emperors? That would be a huge joke. And so, all the experts were confident in their hearts. But just at this time, someone cried out in alarm. This water, why is this water suddenly so cold? Everyone's hearts instantly chilled. The person said. This water was indeed losing heat at an alarming rate. The water that was flowing like a river a moment ago had become slow, and I see why. The next moment. There was no more next moment, before they could even react. And before anyone managed to figure out what was happening, a crisp snapping sound was heard as the water suddenly solidified into ice, encasing everyone in it. That was not all. The temperature was actually still dropping, and the hard ice was still emanating loud crackling sounds, turning harder and harder, with a speed that left one to gasp with shock. The ice began to turn into Xuan ice. And it was transforming faster and faster, as if there wasn't any limit. Xuan ice was something that even the violent sun's rays could not thaw. In terms of hardness, it was even more formidable than metal. Anyone who studied physics would understand that the concept of water turning into ice had to do with the density of the molecules being pulled closer together. At the same time, It would expand in size. If the volume was small, the change would not be too obvious, but by the size of that pit of water, and all of it turning into ice so suddenly. The pressure from it was incredible. All the experts who was trapped were all gritting their teeth and using all their strength as they tried to resist this growing pressure. Right now, it wasn't that nobody had the ability to break the ice around them and escape, but the main problem was that the violent explosive effects from their actions would definitely affect the brothers around them. In such a situation, heavy injuries were naturally unavoidable. Finally, the crowd began to panic. It wasn't possible for everyone to try to break out of the ice together. Such an action would certainly be extremely costly, to the point where only one would live among 10. Everyone was brothers who'd accompanied each other for hundreds to thousands of years. How would they be willing to hurt another brother to save their own lives? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1184. Ice. Xian Ice. Essence of Ice. What should we do? The group looked at each other, their faces all filled with the same question. These were all experts, and even the weakest ones among them were saint-level experts. There were even saint-venerable level experts. But even they were trapped and unable to move at all. If such a situation was known to the outside world, it would definitely spread and turn into a colossal joke. But this joke was actually reality. In just that short moment of hesitation, the ice transformed further, turning crystalline color like jade with a speed visible to the naked eye. The moment this color appeared, it meant this was not just extremely frigid ice. It was now Xian ice. The water that had frozen just a moment ago had in this short time turned to regular ice, and then to Xian ice that normally would only be formed after extremely frigid ice condensed for over 10,000 years. This had been achieved at an extremely accelerated rate. But the transformation actually still hadn't ended. It wasn't just the water transforming. The walls of the pit were also becoming harder and harder, compressing and increasing the pressure on the huge piece of Xian ice. And under that pressure, the ice was turning harder still. The most shocking and amazing transformation was still appearing in everyone's eyes. The Xian ice quickly took form and its color became more and more dazzling, and clearer at the same time. It began to shrink and become more compact. Towards the end, a giant piece of Xian ice seemed to have disappeared. And looking down from above, the 40-something people seemed to be suspended in midair. Water, ice, Xian ice. All of these had completely vanished. But everyone could clearly sense that the ice had not disappeared, only transformed into something else. This was something that everyone had only heard of before, but never seen. Essence of ice. Essence of ice was literally the essence of frost and ice. Even the ice on the peaks of ancient mountains would not necessarily be able to birth a piece of essence of ice the size of a human head. But right now, with just a wave of Jun Moxie's hand, a piece of giant essence of ice several hundred zhang was created. Such a magical ability was truly able to be called the power of creation. That was the essence of ice. A priceless treasure. Ah! If a fist-sized essence of ice was melded with metal and refined by an expert smith, the weapon created would definitely be an unbreakable divine weapon that could cut through metal like mud. Even if a normal person without a shred of Xian cultivation picked it up, he would still be able to cut through a piece of iron refined 100 times. A blade made completely with essence of ice would be even more amazing. The moment the sword left its sheath, the sky and earth would freeze into an icy land. But right now, this essence of ice that most people regarded as a legendary natural treasure had actually been created in such a giant piece before everyone's eyes. Was this a beautiful dream or a nightmare? As the essence of ice appeared, all the transformation finally came to an end. No matter what that meant, This essence of ice that people dreamed for was undoubtedly a nightmare. The people stuck inside could not move at all. That was the legendary essence of ice. Something that was stronger and sharper than any divine weapons. If any of the 40 people made any rash movements, the other 39 would suffer incomparable pain as though countless swords were piercing their body. Even with their powerful bodies, they could not withstand that kind of pain. If it were in another place, these 40 people could still attempt to release their energy at the same time to break out of the ice and escape. This might require precise timing and calculations. But it wasn't anything difficult for these peak experts that it might not be possible to avoid any damage. But the large majority of them would still be able to escape safely. But the problem right now was that this huge piece of essence of ice was situated deep inside a giant pit. Compacted from all sides, the walls around the ice were even harder than the ice itself. If the 40 of them wanted to burst out together, the only possibility was for them to destroy the ice and the walls together, blasting the ground itself away, before they truly had the chance to escape. Although everyone was an expert, they did not have that kind of confidence. If that failed, each person must withstand the combined attack rebounding of the other 39 people. The result would be extremely simple: the 40 of them would turn into a pile of pounded flesh in the same instant. No one would be the exception. And such extreme freezing power made sure that even a Saint Venerable's holy infant might not be able to escape. Right now, the only thing they could do was to observe and wait for rescue. Because there weren't any other methods. Their only option was to wait for Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen to obtain victory first, before coming up with a way to bring them out. After all, they still weren't in mortal danger for the time being. Although they couldn't go out for the time being, as long as they did not make any rash actions while being stuck in there, it wasn't a problem for them to remain there for up to half a month. With Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen's Saint Monarch strength, they would definitely be able to deal with Jun Moxie and Tian Fa's Xian beasts without much trouble. At that time, whether they slowly broke apart the ice or forced Jun Moxie to dispel the essence of ice to free them, it would be a simple affair. As they thought till here, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But what they didn't know was that this was actually only the starter course that Jun Moxie had prepared for them. Jun Moxie's true killing attack was still falling from the sky, only beginning to reach them now. The flame of primal chaos was the true killing blow. Although the Xian ice and essence of ice was formidable, they only had one use, which was to trap and control the movements of these experts. The flame of primal chaos that was falling from the sky did not cover a huge area, and it was falling very slowly, like drifting snow. With this kind of small area of effect and attack speed, any formidable expert above the venerable realm would be able to dodge it with ease. The threat was limited, since it would be useless if it couldn't hit the enemy. But if the targets could not move, it would be a completely different matter. As for the range, it just needed to be the same area as the Xian ice. It was enough to guarantee death. The flame of primal chaos fell down, covering everything entirely completely without any blind spots. Truthfully, this 100-zhang-wide flame of primal chaos rain that Jun Moxie had made was already the limit of his abilities. This was the entirety of the power of the Hongjun Pagoda that he could utilize at this point. Xia Changtian and Jun Moxie. These two saint monarchs could be said to be angered so badly by Jun Moxie that they were spouting fumes from their 7 orifices, just when they were about to attack. They were met with a sudden inferno, followed by torrents of water that fell from the sky. Following that, everything fell out of their control. First, a wide pit with unfathomable depths appeared under the feet, and nearly all their brothers fell into it. The two's cultivation was the highest, And they still managed to hold their footing in the air when the ground under their feet suddenly disappeared. Point 3 of the Saint Venerables and 2 Saint Emperors managed to react quickly enough despite not having the same abilities as them, moving out of the range of the pit. If they hadn't reacted quickly enough, even if they didn't fall into the pit, they would still be washed down by the water. Because of this sudden moment, 40 on their side had already disappeared. Jun Moxie. What kind of tricks are you playing? Xia Changtian cursed as he found his footing in the sky. To actually use this kind of underhanded methods to scheme against us. Such a despicable person like you is actually fit to proclaim yourself as an overlord of your generation? Overlord? I've never said anything about wanting to be an overlord. Jun Moxie's voice drifted over. Xia Changtian. The only thing I want now is to seek justice, so that my brothers can shut their eyes in peace in the underworld. That is all. The reason that Xia Changtian had cursed so loudly right then was because he hoped to draw Jun Moxie into speaking. Before catching him, this fellow was too sly to actually use some kind of stealth technique the moment the fight started. If they couldn't even see him, how could they fight? Although Xia Changtian's cultivation was high, he was not Xiaoying and did not have the all-seeing Eyin truth. Young Master Jun's recent improvements were so great that even if Xiaoying were here, she might not be able to see through his yin-yang escape art. And as he wished, Jun Moxie had spoken, however. His voice was ethereal, seeming to come from every direction. Even Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen with their Saint Monarch cultivation could not pinpoint his direction. That was truly strange. In the sky, a dense column of black flames fell down gracefully. Xia Changtian also did not place much thought to these weak-looking things. Instead, he was looking around carefully, trying to discover Jun Moxie's trace. Young Master Jun was not only in the yin-yang escape void state, he had also hidden his body in the Hongjun Pagoda. Only poking out a head to speak that it was natural that Xia Changtian couldn't find him. However, young Master Jun's condition was not exactly great as well. This was the first time he'd used the power of the 5 elements to such a heavy extent, unleashing them fully without holding anything back. That alone had caused his Xian Qi to be greatly drained until he couldn't endure and had to merge his spiritual sense with the Hongjun Pagoda. Using the power of the Hongjun Pagoda to finish freezing the water, turning it into Xian ice and into essence of ice. Immediately following that, he'd drawn out the flame of primal chaos, throwing it out without a care. And even with his spiritual sense merged with the Hongjun Pagoda, this was all the flame of primal chaos he could conjure anymore. And Jun Moxie would not be able to bear it, even if Jun Moxie wanted to continue. The Hongjun Pagoda would stop him, because Jun Moxie's current strength was only enough to wield this amount of the Hongjun Pagoda's power. If he forced himself, he would instead suffer a backlash, and the results of that backlash would be a complete destruction of his body and soul. However, this was sufficient for now. It was very efficient. Jun Moxie's face was pale, and blood hung on his lips as he looked coldly at the huge pit in the ground. Is this very unbearable? The truly unbearable stuff is right behind. Anticipate it patiently. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1185. Terrifying Flame of Primal Chaos. All of a sudden, Ji Bo Wen roared. Jun Moxie. Come out. Come out for this daddy. If you're a man, roll out here for this daddy. You spineless bastard. Only knowing how to use underhanded methods. As a Saint Monarch, when had Ji Bo Wen ever lost himself like this before? But this time, he couldn't endure no matter what. When he happened to look down, he discovered the strange situation in the pit. Originally, Xia Changtian and him had the same thought. No matter how many strange tricks you have, you can't threaten us. Even the weakest among our experts are at the saint level of cultivation. How can they be burned to death by a bunch of fire? That would be the greatest joke in the world. Even if you can conjure more water, what of it? At best, you can suppress them for a moment. They won't die. Can you maintain it for a long time? The moment the water's force slows down, everyone would be able to charge out in an instant. At that time, their strength will still be completely unaffected. With just you alone, even if you have more magical abilities, could it be that you can take on all 47 people at once? Not to mention a mere Jun Moxie. Even Gu Han would not be able to do that. But in that brief moment that he looked down, he discovered that the water had already stopped. But no one had come out. When he looked closer, he received the greater shock. Xian ice. It was all Xian ice. How did Xian ice appear in a place like this? One had to know. The volcanoes were still erupting in the background, and the temperature was so suffocating that it threatened to bake people alive. But Xian ice actually appeared here? Ji Bowen could scarcely believe his eyes, but when he looked harder again, he couldn't help but exclaim with shock. In just the mere blink of an eye, the Xian ice had turned into essence of ice. Facing this unimaginable miracle, Ji Bowen only had one thought: finished. Those 40 people down there were basically finished already. Unless Jun Moxie suddenly had a change of heart and released them, it was likely that only a few people would be able to come out alive from that pit. The moment they were trapped in the essence of ice, they were already most likely doomed to be frozen together with their brothers beside them. No one would dare to move even a finger. Any rash movements would cause the damage to spread to their own brothers. Right now, the essence of ice had already solidified, and there were no dangers for the moment, but any sudden movements or outside energy would cause the ice to shatter, and countless ice shards as sharp as divine swords would instantly tear everyone apart. If everyone wrapped their Xian Qi around themselves, they might be able to shatter a portion of the essence of ice, but there was no way they could break it completely at once. And those shattered essence of ice would not just disappear, they would turn into tiny lethal weapons with insane killing threat. Xia Changtian and Ji Bowen both turned pale at the same time. They finally understood Jun Moxie's sinister intentions, and also just how terrible his retribution was. His voice reverberated through the air, but Jun Moxie didn't make any form of reply. But at this time, the flame of primal chaos had already begun to fall. Although it was slow, it did not deviate from its path. In truth, this slow descent was that most agonizing part, far more cruel than a swift chop to the neck with a knife. Right now, Xia Changtian once again had an ominous feeling. An extremely ominous feeling. The black flames that were only several qi above his head now actually brought him an indescribable ominous feeling of death. As a powerful Saint Monarch, it had already been an extremely long time since he'd felt such a thing. With a loud clang, he unsheathed his sword and swung it upwards, infusing his strongest Xian Qi and blasting it out. The sword ray instantly extended to 3 zhang, sweeping right towards the flame of primal chaos. The ball of flame continued falling slowly, and such a powerful sword qi that could even tear the air apart did not manage to affect the flame of primal chaos. Its speed was unchanged, and it continued drifting down in a straight line. Xia Changtian's eyes shrank, and all the hairs on his body stood up on its ends. What the hell is this thing? Even if that sword slice of his wouldn't be able to slice a small mountain cleanly into 2, it would still be able to take off a huge chunk from that mountain. But that strange little ball of black flame actually was not affected at all. That is too scary. The ball of flame continued to fall, coming nearer and nearer. Xia Changtian gritted his teeth and once again tightened his grip around his sword. Then, he slowly approached the flame. High in the air, the sharp cry of a sword rang out. If one listened closely, it wouldn't be hard to hear the thick tone of mockery. The only sword that could behave in such a human-like manner was the blood of yellow flame. This old master flew through the air, appearing extremely lively and excited. The meaning of that sword cry was very simple. Are you an idiot? Didn't you see that even this old master needs to stay far away from that flame? And you even went to touch it with your sword? Truly not knowing the meaning of death, this old master feels sorry for your sword. Ah. Xia Changtian's sword came into contact with the flame of primal chaos and actually did not meet with any resistance at all. Seeing this, Xia Changtian loosed a breath of relief, infusing a wisp of Xian Qi. He moved to dispel this ball of fire. But as he did that, he realized that the ball of flame was still burning slowly around the sword, not having any changes at all. The thing that had truly changed was that sword. The sword. All of a sudden, Xia Changtian shivered, and he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. That was a sword that had accompanied him for nearly 4,000 years. But now, it had actually become shorter. What is going on? Why did it lose a section of blade? The flame of primal chaos continued to burn slowly and gracefully. Traveling along the blade, nothing changed from the places that it passed. There was no smoke. And no burnt marks, nothing. There were absolutely nothing. The only thing that changed was that the sword had already shortened to half its original length. The sword hadn't disappeared, it had been burned off. In just a short moment of touching the flame, half of it had already been burned off. What the hell is this thing? Cold sweat instantly appeared all over Xia Changtian's body as he looked at the sword that had almost burned to the hilt. Coming to his senses, he hurriedly flung the sword away as if it were a cursed item. Ji Bowen also tried similar methods to stop the flame of primal chaos, but was also met with the same situation. The sword that had accompanied him was similarly destroyed just like that. Noticing each other's panicked expression, a look of extreme fear began to appear in their eyes. The two of them had guarded the battlefield for over 3,000 years now. And no matter what hardships they faced or how many strange races experts were standing before them, they had never felt a single bit of fear before. But in this moment, the two of them were actually filled with terror. But the flame of primal chaos did not care if they were scared or not. At this time, it had already arrived right above their heads. Shrieking with fright, the two instantly dove downwards, unleashing all their strength as Saint Monarchs. With a speed that far surpassed their normal standards, they instantly sped out of the 100 zhang area, appearing outside of the range of the flame of primal chaos. As they watched the flames falling steadily into the mouth of the pit, the two's faces were the same color as dead ashes. Because one thing was certain now, the 40 brothers down there in the pit were truly going to be in danger. This was something that none of them could do anything about. This thing is called the flame of primal chaos. The two of you probably haven't seen it before. Jun Moxie's voice drifted over in an illusory manner. Sounding somewhat lethargic, coughing lightly, he continued. The flame of primal chaos is somewhat different from other fires in that it exists apart from the 5 elements and isn't countered by them. In other words, water would burn if it comes into contact with it. And so would wood, metal, etc. In this world, there isn't anything the flame of primal chaos cannot burn. That naturally includes the human body. Even things like Xian Qi and souls are not an exception. This should be a rather accurate description, because I've yet to find anything that cannot be burned by it yet. Jun Moxie explained patiently in great detail. The moment those words came out, the 7 great experts that heard it instantly turned pale as they looked towards the pit with fear and anxiousness. Guhan, Mo Wu Dao, and the rest who were watching the battle from a distance also sighed with great sorrow. Everyone's eyes were trembling, and their faces were white. Jun Moxie, you bastard. Where are you? Come out. Come out this instant for me. Xia Changtian roared with rage. All the proud demeanor of a Saint Monarch expert had already disappeared without a trace long ago, and he only sounded hysterical. Jun Moxie, quickly dismiss that fire and let my brothers out. Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen hollered, their voices filled with extreme panic. At this moment, the two of them could be said to be akin to pigs being dangled above a boiling pot of oil. These experts were all brothers who'd known each other for an extremely long time, even the shortest time was a few hundred years. There were even some who'd been brothers for thousands of years, braving blood and fire together. Seeing them falling into such a predicament, their hearts winced with pain to the point where even their souls trembled. Is it very painful? To only be able to watch by the side while your brothers are in danger and facing death? Does it feel good? Is it very enjoyable? A white shadow flashed as Jun Moxie's figure finally appeared in the sky, looking emotionlessly at Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen with his cold eyes. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1186. Come. 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 Feel pleased. Right now, Jun Moxie's face was as pale as a corpse, blood dribbled from the corner of his lips. Mei Xuan gasped and glanced heart-achingly at Jun Moxie, only feeling her heart throbbing in pain. Other people may not know, but how could Mei Xuan, who also cultivated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, not understand? This sort of overloaded, extreme output was not something Jun Moxie could achieve with his current strength. But if he didn't do this, he would not be able to get the justice for his brothers, at least, unable to do it thoroughly. Demanding for justice for his brothers, for the sake of letting his brothers rest in peace in the netherworld, Jun Moxie resolutely activated a power that he was completely unable to carry. Even with the support of the Hongjun Pagoda, his meridians and mind still suffered unusually intense backlash. If he still maintained the combined state with the Hongjun Pagoda, naturally there would be no problem, but the moment he showed himself, he would have to face all this pain with his body alone. But he could not show himself, because he must vent this anger. And also because his brothers must not die for nothing. The price was right before his eyes. Justice will be given amidst this sea of flame of primal chaos, resolving this enmity in an explosive, decisive manner. Repaying this enmity decisively. My brothers have died in a heroic manner. Then my revenge must make all my brothers, be it those that have passed on, or those that are still alive, feel extremely pleased. How my brothers died, all those who had contributed to this debt, be it directly or indirectly, all of you will have to pay it back accordingly. Right now, the flame of primal chaos already touched the ground, completely covering that giant block of essence of ice. Those that were still above the huge pit continued to flutter down slowly, but those flame of primal chaos that had already landed on the ground continued to descend at the same speed. Everything on the ground, be it boulders or rocks, or thick layers of soil, was all turned into nothing the moment it came into contact. Watching the flame of primal chaos slowly descend, and the lives of over 40 brothers in grave danger, Xia Changtian glared angrily. He shot in front of Jun Moxie and yelled, Jun Moxie! Hurry up and keep away that ghostly fire. Release all my brothers. His voice no longer had that arrogance from before. It was hoarse, his eyes were opened so wide that they ripped at the corners. 2 trials of fresh blood flowed down from the corner of his eyes. His appearance resembled that of a ghost. Haha. Xia Chang Tian. Saint Monarch Xia. Are you anxious just like this? Don't be anxious. Watch carefully. At the emptiness. Jun Moxie gently smiled. Reaching his hand up to wipe the blood at the corner of his lips, he stretched out a bloodied finger and pointed at the void that the flame of primal chaos was descending from. He said intriguingly. Take a careful look. If there is anything different about this void? It's really pure. Isn't it? Ha ha ha. Xia Chang Tian looked over and couldn't help but suck in a cold breath of air, wherever that flame of primal chaos had passed. It turned into a black hole. All the spiritual chi in the air was surging over rapidly, quickly patching up this opening. The flame of primal chaos had even burnt an actual space. That sort of terrifying might, if it were to land on flesh. Xia Chang Tian's face turned even more pale. His body swayed unsteadily. What do you want? So that you will release them? State your terms. No matter what it is, I'll agree to it. Xia Chang Tian asked Jun Moxie. Terms? If I had come earlier, not going and bothering about some other people's problems, I believe I would also be just like you. Asking you anxiously, Jun Moxie looked at him expressionlessly and said, What do you want, so that you will go and assist my brothers? From afar, everyone from Heaven's Saint Palace and 3 Holy Lands paled instantly. If Jun Moxie did not intervene to stop Shan Luanhui, with his prowess, he would definitely be able to alter the dreadful number of casualties from Tianfa. Then, were they also indirectly accomplices? But if Jun Moxie did not intervene, then how many of them would be left? No one could be sure of that. Compared to Gu Han and the rest, Xia Chang Tian's condition was worse. Upon hearing this, his entire face turned white, as he stumbled backwards, as if his chest had been struck by lightning. All his reasons, hopes and expectations were utterly defeated with Jun Moxie's simple rhetorical question. But they are my brothers, my brothers. Ah! Xia Chang Tian gripped his chest, hollering tragically. Let go of my brothers. Let go of my brothers. Jun Moxie's white robes fluttered as he stood in the air. His hair swayed in the wind, oozing an air of eerie ruthlessness. His pair of cold eyes looked at Xia Chang Tian amusingly as he asked, Do you feel that your heart is in pain? Ha! That's right. This is precisely what I tasted earlier. When I heard that Eagle King had died earlier, what I felt was the same as you. It really is the same. A bleak smile appeared on Jun Moxie's lips. It was that sort of smile where one was forcing a smile while suppressing the grief in their hearts. Xia Chang Tian. Old Saint Monarch Xia. Now, we can be said to be fellow sufferers who empathize with each other. Why don't we have a toast as we watch these people turn into ashes? Ji Bo Wen flew over in a rush. Second brother Xia. There's not much time left. His tone was filled with sorrow. Even his voice had the stench of blood. It was heart's blood from anxiousness. Xia Chang Tian looked lifelessly at the giant pit, and hearing all the frightened cries coming from it, he only felt his heart shattering. The people below understood how terrifying that flame of primal chaos was. Because that terrifying flame just came descending down, burning everything in its way. So graceful and at ease, like a monarch ruling the world. But that frightening danger had made everyone feel extremely terrified. Xia Chang Tian was already regretting terribly. Why didn't I see this coming? If he had just given the order to appear and provide support, then those 8 Saint Venerables from Tianfa would not have to die. Eagle King would not die. With their intervention, the casualties on Tianfa's side would not exceed 1,000. Everything could have been avoided. But he had insisted to watch on with cold eyes and not give the command. As he watched with folded arms from the sidelines at those warriors battling to deaths, he even found it pleasing. Now, his retribution had arrived. Right now, it was someone else's turn to find it pleasing. Jun Moxie, state your terms. Xia Changtian's entire body trembled. What do you want me to do, so that you will spare those brothers of mine? Terms? What terms? There's no need. No need at all. Someone as powerful as you, the savior of mankind. How can anyone dare to talk terms with you? You don't have to do anything, just continue to watch. That's all. Jun Moxie said apathetically. Didn't you like to watch on coldly the most? Isn't this your forte? Now, you don't have to do anything. Just the thing you're best at. The only thing is that the duration for watching will be shorter. It'll be over in a while. Just a while more, only a while more. It will all be over. Jun Moxie smiled, showing his teeth. Come, 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 to express my apology. This seat shall watch with you, haha. Watching your brothers that you spent your entire life with slowly burn and turn into a pile of bones. No. This seat had spoken wrongly. How could there be bones? They'll all turn into nothing. In fact, it's not only their bones. Even their souls will be gone. That I can even guarantee that they won't have the chance to reincarnate. All that cultivation of thousands of years turning into nothing. Not even ashes. How pleasing is that? Huh. We experienced this once with our brothers from Tianfa earlier. Now, due to you, we get to experience this pleasure again. How could all you compassionate heroes, savior of mankind, miss out on something this great? And, come, come, come. I'll let you both feel pleased too. Feel pleased. Xia Changtian stared deadly at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie, you may have a good appearance, but you are inhuman. You have no human nature. You're a beast. No wonder you are willing to abandon yourself and keep company with a bunch of wild beasts. Yeah, turns out you only realized this now. Ah. But I do not think that I had abandoned myself. To be able to keep company with the Xian beasts of Tianfa, who have the purest hearts, is the greatest fortune in my entire life. Jun Moxie chuckled coldly. If I had the same type of benevolent human nature as you did, then that'll really be the greatest insult in my life. Jun Moxie. Ji Bowen yelled. All these people are heroes who stood guard at the pillar of heaven's mountains for the safety of mankind. Some of them never stepped foot out of the mountain for thousands of years, offering their entire life to the war for seizing the heavens, to the Xian continent. And you are going to kill them all just like this? I never denied that they are heroes, and never denied their contributions to this continent. Jun Moxie said solemnly. But heroes also will need to die. Heroes will also need to pay the price for their mistakes. Don't assume that others will give in to you just because you are a hero. Let me tell you, in this world, no one owes you anything. That I and my brothers owe you nothing. Since you had responsibility in causing the death of my brothers, then you must pay the price. Even if you are the savior, you will also have to pay the equivalent price. This is fairness, and the justice that I seek. If the heavens don't give me justice, then I'll obtain it myself. If the earth doesn't give me justice, I'll fight for it myself. If you do not give me an account, I'll get it myself. The world doesn't give any account, then it can wait to be destroyed. Ha ha ha. Jun Moxie laughed into the skies, pointing at it. Even if this world is really destroyed, so what? How many such worlds are there in the universe? Who is right? Who is wrong? The logic that is acknowledged here may just be unacceptable in other words. The justice here may be despicable things in other worlds. But only the bond between brothers will be the same no matter which world you are in, not changing for eternity. Just like you all. Just like us. Jun Moxie said solemnly. We are now enemies. Only one of us will survive. You will feel sad when your brothers died, that we also feel sad when our brothers died. How can the joy of rejoicing alone compare to rejoicing with others? You make me upset. How can I not make you feel hurt? The logic of an eye for an eye. Scratch my back and I'll scratch yours is the truth no matter where it is applied. It is all eternal. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1187. Furious Rage. Battling a Saint Monarch. I didn't want to talk so much bullshit with you all. But, if I don't say it, I feel displeased. True pleasure is watching you all struggling in displeasure while speaking about my pleasure. Only in this way, I can allow my brothers in the netherworld to move on with no regrets. Jun Moxie laughed loudly, maniacally. Perhaps. This is what is called an appropriate retribution. Xia Changtian's face completely turned malevolent. There's no hope. The ending has already been set. This evil monarch is definitely not going to compromise. He had already offered everything possible. But this evil monarch still remained indifferent. No. It was not indifferent. He is simply watching my agony, my pain, and enjoying my suffering with an extreme thrill from getting his revenge. The pit may be deep, but the flame of primal chaos has already fallen in, although it is descending slowly. It will only be a moment before it came in contact with his brothers. The brother of those brothers had already become a fixed conclusion. Jun Moxie. Have you ever considered that if these brothers of mine really die, what sort of price you will have to pay? All the muscles on Xia Changtian's face spasmed. A cruel look shooting from his eyes that he was practically about to go berserk. Price? I had really not thought of it. Jun Moxie's pupils constricted. With just the few of you alone, what sort of price did you think you can make me pay? If my brothers all die, then all these soldiers from Tianfa present. I assure you. Xia Changtian's voice was laced with a chilling murderous intent. Not a single one of them will survive. Jun Moxie's eyes constricted greatly. He calmly looked at Xia Changtian and enunciated every single word slowly. As long as you dare to behave brazenly, then I will keep you company to the end. He slowly lifted his eyelids, an incisive look in his eyes as he said, Xia Changtian, you dare to kill one of my men today, I'll kill 100 of yours. You kill 3 of mine, I'll let the 3 holy lands be completely wiped out for good. I'm waiting for you, Xia Changtian. As long as you dare to try. I, Jun Moxie, am also no pushover. The two glared at each other so intensively that sparks seemed to fly in the air. Xia Changtian had a look of utter despair and grief, and even a hint of exhaustion. Whereas Jun Moxie's gaze was that of a completely crazed look, triggered by Xia Changtian's words. It was just that Xia Changtian still had a look of caution in the mix, that he was still worrying about the war for seizing the heavens. Worrying about the entire world. If it was merely a battle with him and Jun Moxie, it could still be said to be between them and did not implicate the bigger picture. This was also the biggest reason why Jun Moxie ultimately insisted on facing the 47 of them on his own. Because the moment Mei Xuan and the rest get involved, then 3 holy lands, Tianfa, and evil monarch manor will thoroughly fall out. Jun Moxie could not afford this sort of responsibility. Jun Moxie believed that if death was inevitable for him and his brothers, then would they rather die in the process of resisting the strange races than die in the hands of the three holy lands. Because it was not worth it. Xia Changtian's apprehensions were more complicated than Jun Moxie's. If he really fought with Jun Moxie, implicating the three holy lands and Tian Fa forest, then they could forget about battling the strange races. They would have already lost. Then he would become the sinner of all mankind. Xia Changtian had protected the continent for 3,000 years. His soul had already been soaked with this responsibility. The glory of this had already penetrated through his veins. He valued reputation and glory above everything. How could he be willing to bear the name of the sinner of the continent? Xia Changtian had apprehensions, but Jun Moxie didn't. The continent will be destroyed? Destroyed then. Destroyed it is, after all. The problem that you three holy lands caused, what has it got to do with me? Even if the continent must be destroyed because of this battle between us, I also will not wait helplessly for death under your hands. At most, we can all be annihilated together. People die all the time. So what's the big deal? You can throw your life away. But so can I. We all only have one brain. We are all the same anyway. Scaring me? Threatening me? God dang it. Xia Changtian, didn't you assure you'd do it? Why aren't you doing it? I'm waiting for you to do it. Jun Moxie looked at him icily. It can't be that you also only know how to assure things verbally. Do you dare to swear it? Kill 10,000 of my brothers? Who did you think you are? Do you have this sort of capability? Where did you get the guts? Xia Changtian finally went crazy. He howled and hollered. Jun Moxie, you forced me to do this. His gaze shifted and landed on Mei Shuiyan, Big Bear, and the rest who were watching the situation, a fierce look in his eyes. Clearly, he would strike any time. Jun Moxie's figure suddenly vanished and appeared again in the blink of an eye. In this momentary flash, his aura had already undergone a complete change. His aura was imposing. In everyone's eyes, the Jun Moxie at this moment had represented all the lives in the world with his body. Jun Moxie took a step forward. Only one step. It was only one step. Ha! It was as if waves of ripples had appeared in the space of the entire world, even the mountains distorted and warped into a weird shape. The entire space quaked and there was a sudden instability in the air that instantly distorted the entire world, causing the eyes to develop this sort of misperception. Even Gu Han, Xia Changtia, and Ji Bo Wen were no exception. The entire world suddenly shook. Gu Han's face changed. He raised his head in shock, looking at Jun Moxie, who was approaching Xia Changtian, a look of utter disbelief in his eyes. Both the Saint Monarchs, Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen's faces changed. They only felt an overwhelming pressure pressing down on them with this step from Jun Moxie. All the strength of the world had gathered in this moment and was pressing down like mad. They couldn't help but step back. As the two of them had already activated all their Xian Qi to face this terrifying pressure, their subconscious steps back had caused two huge holes to appear on the ground with a hong. Jun Moxie chuckled icily. Xia Changtian, I'll tell you the truth. Even without the threat earlier, you were destined not to live past today. You are the main culprit that caused the death of my brothers. The reason why I spent so much time bullshitting with you is to let you carefully savor the taste of your brothers dying right before you. Right. Don't say that it was this young master who caused your brothers to die. The real culprit was you. And themselves. Because of your decisions, it led to this sort of outcome today. Now, I believe you have tasted it enough, CME. Let this young master send you on your way. You must absolutely remember that in your next life. Do not make me upset. The backlash from striking after merging with the Hongjun Pagoda was too severe. Especially after he scattered the flame of primal chaos, then remerged with it. The consequences were one that Jun Moxie could not predict. But the severe injury on his body and soul was definitely a fact. Jun Moxie did not intend to be this harsh when the strange races were about to attack, not for himself, but the fear that he would not be able to protect the brothers he had sent out. They had all came because of his one command. How could Jun Moxie not be worried and not be responsible for it? How could he not be worried over it? But Xia Changtian's threat had instantly enraged Jun Moxie. How dare you use my brothers to threaten me? If I don't kill you, I'll be letting the heaven and earth, my brothers and my own conscience. Let's just kill them. A crazed look flashed in his eyes that he suddenly yelled. Then let this world be destroyed together then. Sword. Jun Moxie hollered. The blood of yellow flame let out a cry and instantly vanished. The next time it appeared, it was already in front of debauchee. The sword was chilling. Its cold glint so overwhelming and condescending. This sword had completely bypassed all the attacks from debauchee, a saint monarch. A man and a sword, using the most powerful manner to stop these two saint monarchs. The sword and men were the same. Cold. Unyielding. Xia Changtian chuckled coldly. Jun Moxie. I indeed am helpless against those tricks of yours, but you really think that you could stop both of us with your strength alone? Should I scorn you for your foolish conceit or overestimating your capabilities? Jun Moxie. Did you think too highly of yourself? Tricks are only usable for sneak attacks. A real battle relies on your own strength. Fool. Jun Moxie had no intentions to answer. With a flash of his thoughts, a 9-nether frost blade suddenly appeared in his hand. Instantly, this pitch black suddenly lit up, exuding a blinding color. The purest shade of black, darker than the color black itself. As if a pure, black flame was lit up in the air. Dark, but splendid. Xia Changtian. I already said it either. The main culprit that had caused the sacrificing of my brothers is you. Which is why I went through the trouble to let you experience how it is like to lose your brothers. Now the show is over. So you can go and die now. Go and atone for your crimes to my brothers in the Yellow Springs. The moment Jun Moxie finished saying this, the frost blade in his hand shot forward, its black shine filling the entire sky. Like a sharp sword that sliced through the heavens. It attacked aggressively at the saint monarchs before him. On the other side, the invincible weapon, the blood of yellow flame, also let out a piercing cry. Its glow magnifying like a lightning that cut across the skies, flying at debauchee. To be honest, this was a 2-on-2 battle. Jun Moxie and the blood of yellow flame were two independent bodies that were fighting on their own, with no association with each other. But in the eyes of others watching this, it was clearly a case of one person wielding two swords, one with his hand and the other with the sword control technique, battling two saint monarchs intensively simultaneously. Everyone drew a cold breath of air. Even those from Tianfa were no exception. This Jun Moxie is truly outrageously brazen. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1188. Right and Wrong. But for the higher-ups of 3 holy lands, it was not too astonishing for them. Jun Moxie had obtained considerable battle results when battling Zhan Luanhui in this same manner the day before. Zhan Luanhui's strength was a profound mystery and had already surpassed the limits of other humans practicing the same cultivation, while numerous experts from the Heaven Saint Palace couldn't stop him. Jun Moxie had managed to obstruct his way with his strength alone and was even advantageous when battling him. This sort of shocking prowess was enough to shock the world. And it was also what Gu Han had based his decision on earlier. Although Tian Fa had clinched a great victory, they had suffered a dreadful loss, losing all 8 Saint Venerables, the Eagle King, and 5,000 elite forces. The battling forces of Tian Fa had been greatly crippled. Whereas those who stood guard at the battlefield of the war for seizing the heavens had considerable strength and were truly one of themselves. If Jun Moxie had not revealed such powerful capabilities, even if Gu Han would not stand on Xia Changtian's side, he would only try to smooth things and definitely not make such a choice. Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen's faces were filled with grief and frustration, attacking at the same time. They both had the same thing in mind: take down Jun Moxie quickly. Only this way, we can save those 40 brothers down there. The longer we take, the more dangerous the situation becomes for them. Those other 3 Saint Venerable and 2 Saint Emperors who managed to escape remained rooted to their spot. They were at a loss as to what to do. They also wished to join the battle. But with whom? Jun Moxie had carried out everything on his own. He made himself a representative to demand for justice, to get his revenge and vent his anger from start to end. Not a single other person from Tian Fa had spoken. Although they knew that this was Jun Moxie's intention, they still couldn't do anything to Mei Shuyan and the rest. The moment they did, they knew that they would not be able to bear the consequences. They were not like Saint Monarchs, they were not that powerful. Even Xia Changtian may not dare to do so. He was just throwing empty threats. It was not because he was afraid to deal with Tian Fa, and not because of Jun Moxie's threat, but because of the bigger picture. The root of this matter was because they had watched coldly from the sidelines with no intention to assist or support, which ultimately led to Tian Fa's Eagle Bear army getting almost wiped out. Jun Moxie stepping out as the leader to demand for justice was completely fair, and no one had anything to say about it. Even Gu Han and the rest could only try to smooth things over, but they could not attempt to absolve the matter. Even if Xia Changtian and Ji Bo Wen died as a result of this, they only had themselves to blame. No one could say anything about it. But if everyone charged forward and attacked Jun Moxie, then this matter would change completely. But Gu Han would also not consent to this. Old Gu, even if Saint Monarch Xia and the rest did not offer assistance, there is also no need to fight like this, isn't it? Isn't Jun Moxie's reaction a little too extreme? He completely isn't considering the bigger picture. Ah! A Saint Emperor from 3 Holy Lands said carefully to Gu Han. The bias behind his words was extremely clear. That's not the right way to put it. The one who had rebutted this time was Mo Wu Dao. He sighed and said, not rendering assistance this time may seem like a small matter, but in fact, it has deep-rooted implications. Firstly, for the past hundreds of years, the 3 Holy Lands joined forces to crush Tian Fa, practically ruining it at a stroke. If it wasn't for the appearance of Jun Moxie, Tian Fa Forest may already have been doomed for good. It can be said that it is us who kicked Tian Fa out of our alliance, and our relationship is that of enemies that cannot live under the same sky. With the current situation, even if Tian Fa Forest does not come to this battle, no one can say anything about it. After all, even the strange races don't dare to barge into their Tian Fa Forest. Plus they are not even human. There is no standpoint to criticize them. But they came with great resolve and determination. For the sake of the common lives of the world, for the Xian continent, they put aside the old enmity with us. This alone is an act of great righteousness. This is one of the reasons. Mo Wu Dao had been at conflict with Tian Fa with endless enmity, and he had a vengeance with Jun Moxie for killing his younger brother. But this person did not lose the air of a leader. On a big matter like this, his comments were unbiased and impartial, completely speaking from facts. This was something worth commending. Secondly, Gu Han continued coldly. TNFA came as a result of the 3 Holy Lands in treaty. To put it bluntly, it is us who put our pride aside and managed to get them to come and offer assistance, but no matter what TNFA's original intentions were, the 3 Holy Lands are indebted to them. In terms of the battle strategy, they are our comrades in battle. The situation this time was the most dreadful. The 3 Holy Lands practically had no chance of victory and were on the brink of danger, but TNFA's appearance and assistance had saved us. By not assisting, Xia Changtian and the rest were biting at the hand that is helping us. Gu Han sighed. This was the other reason why he was unwilling to help reconcile the situation. Ji Yuhan was extremely enraged by Xia Changtian and the rest's behavior and actions. Furthermore, if he tried to intervene, Gu Han knew that he didn't have that much face before Jun Moxie. The moment he opened his mouth, the greatest possibility was that even those who were left will also be sent to their doom. They may be unaware of Jun Moxie's prowess, but how could Gu Han be? And the worst thing was, this Jun Moxie was more perverse than that Zhang Kuang. He was one that could not be killed. When 2 countries are at war and 2 armies are slaying it out on the battlefield, if one troop falls into impasse while the other remained completely unmoved and simply watches on, this is a capital offense. A crime of treason. Mo Wu Dao chuckled bitterly. It is the same as rebellion. An unpardonable crime. Thus, no matter how you look at it, the manner Saint Monarch Xia handled this matter was a big mistake. When put in a smaller picture, he was being disloyal and ungrateful, but in the bigger picture, no matter who from TNFA raises up this matter, the falling out of both parties is likely to be more than 80%. This sort of act is literally disregarding the safety of the world, toying with the fate of the common lives. It is reprehensible and insane. Gu Han let out a deep sigh. The Saint Emperor who raised the question couldn't help but feel a little astonished. Lord Mo, why would you? Mo Wu Dao chuckled bitterly and said, Indeed, I never liked TNFA, the evil monarch manner, nor even Jun Moxie himself. This is a fact. Be it in the past, or in the future, I will still insist on going against TNFA. But right now, at this moment, before a right and wrong like this, I, Mo Wu Dao, am not one to be so biased and turn a blind eye to righteousness. When we dealt with TNFA, it was after determining that the strange races did not have the ability to invade, and we had complete confidence for the war for seizing the heavens, even if we completely annihilated TNFA. That was the internal affairs of the continent. But if the strange races are powerful, I will not start an internal war no matter what. He let out a long sigh. If I knew about what will happen today, then I would have mended the relation with TNFA at all costs. At least, I must ensure the victory of this battle before anything else. I definitely will not give the order to deal with TNFA. The affairs of the world changes so easily with time. It truly makes one dazzled and stunned. But who would have thought that the majestic 10,000-year-old pillar of heaven's mountains would collapse at this sort of crucial timing? Shi Ruochen let out a long sigh before gritting his teeth tightly and cursing. That god-danged Zhan Luan Hui. That god-danged Zhan Luan Hui. Then this battle between Saint Monarch Xia and Jun Moxie, are we really only able to just watch? And the lives of those 40 brothers, are we forsaking it as well? That Saint Emperor asked, a little unwilling to resign just like that. This is the price that Jun Moxie is demanding. And Jun Moxie also has the strength to demand this price. We can only watch. Especially, when it is in such a delicate situation, all the more we cannot move. Recklessly moving will only cause greater troubles ahead. A look of grief flashed in Gu Han's eyes. The outcome of today is the result of the cause created from yesterday, reaping what you've sown. Who can we blame? Are we going to insist inverting right and wrong and starting a war with Tianfa and the evil monarch manor first? And let the strange races reap the benefits? Chu Wuhui happened to be standing behind Gu Han. He couldn't suppress a long, deep sigh. Suddenly, Gu Han's pupils constricted. Turning pale with fright, he stomped his foot and sighed deeply. Oh no! Looks like I still underestimated Jun Moxie's real strength. Perhaps it's not only those 40 brothers who will, even Xia Chang Tian might be done for. Even Gu Han was shocked speechless by his own words and the facts before his eyes. Jun Moxie had this sort of terrifying, heaven-defying capabilities? Everyone was stunned and looked over. All their jaws dropped and were left hanging. Everyone had tried to guess how this battle would end, but they had never imagined that it would be like this. Jun Moxie was the evil monarch and did not have ordinary cultivation. He also had the accomplishment of repressing Zhan Luanhui. But his advancement halted at the realm of a saint venerable and didn't seem to have broken through the levels of a saint monarch, while Xia Chang Tian had the cultivation of a saint monarch. And a third level one. So everyone had assumed that the Xia Chang Tian would be in the advantageous position in the battle. Even Gu Han also thought so. Then, after a certain level, when it was clear who was going to be the victor, Gu Han would step out and try to reconcile the matter and resolve this issue. But since the moment they clashed, Xia Chang Tian had been in the absolute disadvantageous position. An irrevocable decline. No one would have dreamt of this situation. Everyone was flabbergasted. Jun Moxie moved as fast as the wind. The blade 9 nether frost blade was like the rising wind and scudding clouds. His xian qi surged unendingly. That narrow 9 nether frost blade turned into a huge piece of black cloud in the air. The entire world turned dark. A single 9 nether frost blade filled the entire sky with its presence, covering the world, as if the winds and clouds of the 9 nethers had descended upon this dreadful battlefield, engulfing the entire world. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1189. Blood for blood. An eye for an eye. Xia Chang Tian went forward to meet him, although his movements, blocks, and attacks were not slow at all. He could only match blow for blow, unable to retaliate at all. Saint Monarch Xia's face had already turned the same color as pig's liver. Intense humiliation filled his heart completely. Even in his wildest dreams, he never would have imagined that Jun Moxie's abilities were this great. From the start of the fight, he'd only been defending and defending continuously. He never managed to complete an attack even a single time. From the start, he was being suppressed. And until now, Jun Moxie's momentum had not faltered at all. It instead became fiercer and fiercer, more and more explosive. Not to mention Gu Han and the rest who were watching outside. Even Xia Chang Tian himself was still completely confused as to how matters had reached such a point that he was a legitimate Saint Monarch expert. And although Jun Moxie was not weak either, he was clearly only a Saint Venerable and was undoubtedly much inferior to him. But how the situation? Right now, Xia Chang Tian only felt as if he'd fallen into particularly nasty quicksand. The more he struggled, the faster he sank. And now, he was already in a mortal crisis. He only remembered seeing Jun Moxie's sword piercing towards him at the start, and he wanted to block the attack and counterattack, quickly bringing this wild brat down quickly to save his brothers. But who would have thought that this seemingly simple-looking stab actually covered an area of several zhang. If he retreated, it would naturally be easy to dodge the attack, But where would he place his pride as a saint monarch if he retreated at the first instance when fighting against a wild junior? And so, Xia Changtian decided to stand his ground, but because of that, he could not launch his own attack for the time being, from the sharpness of that pitch-black sword. It was obvious that he couldn't block it with his body and had to dodge it. But before he could complete the dodging action, the other sword had already arrived under his throat. Xia Changtian's eyes widened with shock, and he hurriedly spun to the side, right into the path of another sword that was heading right for his heart. Xia Changtian once again dodged, jumping up like a puppet, but right when he was about to counter the attack, another sword was piercing towards his dantian. And so, Xia Changtian began the tragedy of dodging and retreating repeatedly without being able to fight back, from the start of the battle until now. Less than 2 breaths of time had passed, but Jun Moxie had already sent out 365 swords. Each sword gleamed with terrifyingly sharp radiance, and Xia Changtian also dodged for 365 times. Each dodge was harder than the last, and his appearance became more and more wretched. There was completely no opportunity to return an attack. As he dodged, Xia Changtian realized to his horror that even if he wanted to bet his life and go all out, he didn't seem to have the chance to do that. If he wanted to cause any damage to his opponent, the only method was to self-detonate. Xia Changtian suddenly felt a chill surge through his heart. How could things end like that? He'd experienced countless battles. But how could a person like him be forced to such an extent by a youth? Could it be that this was actually just a really bad dream? But even if it was a nightmare, it couldn't be this ridiculous. Jun Moxie's face was expressionless, and his eyes were as cold as ice as he stabbed out with his swords repeatedly, completely emotionless. Jun Moxie's, who'd fully merged with the Hongjun Pagoda. Battle strength had already been raised to the shocking level of a half-sage like Zhan Luanhui. Against Xia Changtian, who was only a 3rd-level Saint Monarch, he could control the battle perfectly. That was the reason he'd been able to dominate Xia Changtian and suppress him completely from the moment the battle began, not giving him even the time to catch a breath. Xia Changtian was growing more and more insane as he fought, and more depressed that he felt as if his face was being dragged through the ground. It was just a single wrong decision, but all his brothers had been pushed into a deep pit which they couldn't come out from. First, he was humiliated in public. Then he'd been questioned and blamed in front of the crowd. After that, he had to watch his old brothers fall into a deadly situation which he could do nothing about. Then, he himself was forced into such an embarrassing state. As he looked at the hateful and perverted look of satisfaction in Jun Moxie's eyes, Xia Changtian finally understood what Jun Moxie's true method of revenge was. It was to let him taste the desperation of watching helplessly as his brothers stared death in the face, before using the most humiliating means to toy with him. You are truly ruthless. Xia Changtian dodged another slash and hollered. His eyes lined with blood, the golden hair crown on his head shattered with a loud bang, and his long black hair flew down. Fluttering behind him, blood streamed down from his head, drenching the ground. Xia Changtian, I lost many good brothers because of you, so I naturally need to make you watch helplessly as your brothers die in front of your eyes. You are fated to be able to enjoy this beautiful scene right in front of your eyes. But even if you don't want to enjoy this scene, you still have to. Jun Moxie cackled evilly as more black swords appeared, covering the sky like a black cloud, falling from the sky like a black waterfall. Xia Changtian, do you feel very guilty? Do you feel that you're very useless? Do you feel a heart-wrenching pain and endless regrets? Jun Moxie asked as he sent out 99 swords at once. At the same time, he roared. Flame of primal chaos. Fall for me. all of a sudden, the slowly drifting flame of primal chaos accelerated and fell down with greater speed, towards the lifeless and desperate eyes below. Terrible, hair-raising cries began to ring out from the pit, shrill and helpless, covering the entire area and causing all who heard it to shudder with shock. Yes, Jun Moxie had always been in control, not allowing the flame of primal chaos to fall so quickly. Because the revenge he wanted hadn't been completed. Slicing apart the flesh slowly was the true torture. If the flame of primal chaos fell down swiftly, turning everything into ashes, ending everything in an instant, would that be satisfying? Was that how revenge should feel like? No. Death was not scary. What was scary was knowing that death was unavoidable, and right in front of your eyes. But it just wouldn't arrive. That feeling of waiting for death was the most terrifying. It was like those people who proclaimed to be scared of nothing and would not even blink in the face of death, but if someone were to get a hold of their family or friends and start to torture them. What Xie Changtian cared about the most was also not his own life. To destroy the things that the enemy was the most attached to, before claiming his life, was the true torture. From the moment Jun Moxie decided to carry out his revenge, he'd already decided on this idea. You killed my brothers, but you want to die a swift death? Dream on. Otherwise, although the flame of primal chaos was slow, it still wouldn't be this slow. Death was not necessarily scary, but when death was dragged out, it would be much more tortuous. Like how Xie Changtian could only watch as his brothers looked at him, their eyes looking forward to his rescue, while death hovered right above them, yet he was completely helpless to help them. Furthermore, their plight was also a result of his actions. Xie Changtian was the most tormented one in this moment. And Jun Moxie was going to let him enjoy the most of this torment. As he listened to the inhuman screams of terror, Xie Changtian's heart bled as though he was being cut by 1,000 knives. Suddenly, he began to charge forward, no longer trying to dodge. Roaring. Someone is responsible for every grievance, and there is a debtor for every debt. This matter was completely my idea. Jun Moxie, if you have any grievances, you can direct everything at me directly. There's no need to torment my brothers. There's no need to continue. Are you in a lot of pain? Xie Changtian, you are the cause of everything. Jun Moxie's ruthless swords shot out continuously, and a blood mist suddenly burst out around Xie Changtian. Since this matter was started by me, those brothers of mine are all innocent. Xie Changtian's body was covered in blood, and he stared fiercely at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie, as long as you let them go, I will put down all resistance and you may do as you please with me. Ha 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 ha. Jun Moxie laughed aloud. If you had been willing to say that before the fight, I might have applauded your courage and ended the matter with taking your life. But to say such words at this kind of time will only make me look down on you. You can't be dreaming that you still have any chips to bargain with me at this point, right? Could it be that I cannot do as I please with you if you didn't allow me? Hearing this, Xie Changtian turned completely mad as he finally discarded the last of his pride and charged forward. Jun Moxie, since you insist on pushing me too far, then let us perish together. Even if me and my brothers dies, I will still drag you to accompany us. Die for me. His aura suddenly shrunk, and the entire space seemed to have frozen in that instant. In the next moment, the chi around them suddenly grew violent and began to funnel madly into his body. After the previous huge battle here and the self-detonation of countless experts, the heaven-earth spiritual chi here were extremely chaotic. Any cultivator would need to be careful when absorbing the energy here, afraid that they would ingest too much impure chi. But Xia Changtian was swallowing everything without regards for the consequences. Whether it was useful or harmful spiritual qi, he sucked in everything into his body and his meridians. From this point on, there was no turning back. Gu Han's eyes flickered, and he instantly understood the current situation. Gasping aloud, he shouted, "Everyone, quickly retreat." As his command rang out, everyone on the Three Holy Lands side instantly began to flee. In the blink of an eye, they'd already retreated several hundred zhang away. Everybody's face were grave and sullen. On the side of Tian Fa, although they were worried about Jun Moxie, but under the strict command of Mei Shuiyan, they also quickly retreated several hundred zhang away. Everyone was watching fixedly at the changes on the battlefield, their eyes filled with endless satisfaction and worry. The opponent was still a Saint Monarch peak expert. If he went all out and placed his life on the line to self-detonate, even if Jun Moxie's techniques were amazing and his speed was great, he might not necessarily be able to escape fully. Only Mei Shuiyan was not worried about Jun Moxie's safety at all. Jun Moxie had the Hongjun Pagoda with him, and even if the world exploded, he would still be completely unharmed. Seeing how unworried Mei Shuiyan was, Big Bear also relaxed. Xia Changtian grinned uglily as he stood in the air, looking at Jun Moxie. His aura was still rising constantly, reaching the peak of the 3rd level of Saint Monarch, continuing to increase. Only when he reached the peak of 4th level Saint Monarch did he finally stop. The wind in the sky actually completely stopped because of the forceful absorption. The countless wounds left on Xia Changtian's body had abruptly stopped bleeding. That skinny body was actually beginning to bloat slowly. It became a round ball shape that floated in the sky. Second brother Xia. Don't. On the other side, Ji Bo Wen, who was being suppressed by blood of yellow flame, yelled. Blood of yellow flame could even suppress Shan Luan Hui, and against a mere 2nd level Saint Monarch, it was able to completely dominate him. But Ji Bo Wen was still a Saint Monarch at the end of the day. Although he was being suppressed, he could still hold his stance. To defeat blood of yellow flame was naturally impossible. But if the blood of yellow flame wanted to kill him, it would also be extremely difficult, and so, the situation ended with a stalemate. At this time, Xia Changtian was already irredeemable. He was already committed to dragging Jun Moxie down with him. Roaring loudly, Ji Bo Wen charged forward without caring about defending, hoping to break out of blood of yellow flame's control and stop Xia Changtian's extreme actions. Unfortunately, no matter how anxious he was, and how much he tried, he could not escape from blood of yellow flame. Every attempt was dissolved by blood of yellow flame, forcing him back repeatedly. A few breaths later, Xia Changtian's aura had reached its peak. At this point, he no longer cared about anything. The tragic cries of his brothers had already caused him to lose all his reason long ago. At this time, the cries emanating from the pit were already become fewer and weaker. But every cry, no matter how small or how frail, would still pierce deeply into Xia Changtian's heart like a knife. Xia Changtian no longer had any hopes to hold on to life. Such a huge humiliation. Such a great hatred. If he couldn't wash this shame away, how would he have the face to continue living? Only death would suffice. Xia Changtian laughed maniacally, tears flowing freely from his eyes. In the last 3,000 years, this was the first time that this Saint Monarch had ever cried. There was regret, hatred, despotic rage, grief, despair. Jun Moxie, leave with me. Jun Moxie stared fixedly at him, watching his every movement, gritting his teeth ruthlessly. He said, Xia Changtian, this is the end of your road. Because you refused to help, resulting in the death of many of my Tian Fa brothers, I will kill your brothers today. You caused my brothers to self-detonate. So I will force you to self-detonate as well. Blood for blood. An eye for an eye. This was the method that Jun Moxie was the most adept with. Jun Moxie's revenge had always been this direct and straightforward. And Xia Changtian finally understood. His ultimate counterattack, self-detonation, had actually been part of the opponent's plan. And it was also the goal of the opponent. This kind of feeling of being played and controlled like a puppet was so unbearable that Xia Changtian would rather die. At this time, the cries from the large pit had already completely disappeared. Xia Changtian only felt endless emptiness in his heart. And he could clearly sense that those brothers of his had already been completely wiped from the face of this world. There might not even be any traces of them left. And Xia Changtian finally lost the last shred of hope in his heart. Right now, he had the same reaction that Big Bear had when Eagle King died. It was a feeling that was more unbearable than death. But this time, it was a completely different concept. Bear King's brothers had died in battle, protecting their home and land. Whereas Xia Changtian's brothers had died because they were implicated by Xia Changtian. The two could not be compared together. At this moment, Big Bear could not help but think of his brother. Now, apart from guilt, there was a trace of pride in his heart. And reminiscence. But Xia Changtian was different. Apart from guilt, there was only guilt in his heart. Even if he went to the underworld right now, he wouldn't have the face to meet those brothers of his. Xia Changtian was completely crushed. Jun Moxie. This old man regrets. This old man regrets not killing those beasts with my own hands. This old man hates it. Ah! Xia Changtian raised his head and roared bitterly. Kill my brothers with my own hands? You don't have the qualifications for that. Xia Changtian. At the very least, my brothers truly died for the sake of the people of this world. As for you, what is your death worth? Even if you died 10,000 more times, it would not compare to the life of a single brother of mine. You are the greatest disgrace of the Xian continent. The source of infighting, the sinner of mankind, the traitor of the world. Complete and utter trash. Xia Changtian cried aloud. The sins of the entire world may be on my shoulders, but I still have you to accompany me through the yellow springs. Jun Moxie. Let us die together. A gigantic boom rang out, and the entire sky was suddenly filled with a white light. As that cry rang out, Saint Monarch Xia Changtian finally completed the last segment of his self-detonation. The violent explosion blasted a hole through the thick smoky air. And in that moment, the beautiful blue sky could actually be seen on this battlefield where volcanic smoke hung so deeply. Directly following that, a huge mushroom cloud flew high into the air, covering the hole in the sky and blocking out the sunlight once again. After that, a huge pit about 200 zhang wide appeared on the ground, its depths unfathomable. Far away, a portion of the people from the three holy lands and Tianfa actually directly fainted from the power of the shockwave. Thousands of tents were blown away, swirling in the sky and disappearing from sight. The entire land began to rumble fiercely. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1190. Kill one more. Explosion. Dust and sand flew everywhere, and an additional huge hole of shocking size appeared in the middle of the ground that it rivaled even the large pit that Jun Moxie had made using the power of earth. Xia Changtian, who'd self-detonated, was naturally already turned into a pile of ashes, and couldn't be more dead. even his holy infant hadn't been left behind. As for Jun Moxie, who was right at the center of the explosion, he'd also completely disappeared without a trace. This kid wouldn't have perished alongside Xia Tian, would he? Gu Han and the rest's faces were heavy and unspeakably ugly. If those two had died together, this matter would be extremely grave. Right now, the hearts of the people from the three holy lands could be said to be extremely chaotic. No one was mourning for Xia Tian, but in that moment, they were actually praying that Jun Moxie, their mortal enemy, would be fine. Even Mo Wu Dao, who normally yearned so badly for Jun Moxie's death, was also praying hard in that moment. Jun Moxie, please don't be dead. Right now, the continent truly cannot afford this. The most important thing was that if Jun Moxie died together with Xia Tian, not only would there be no hope of having the help of Tian Fa's army, the Xian beasts might even go mad and destroy the entire three holy lands. Every single expert was peering nervously at the cloud of dust, as if they were awaiting the birth of a deity. A total of 40 experts, along with a saint monarch, had disappeared in just such a short time. And all of this had been because of a single person. If Jun Moxie was still alive after doing that, it would be too terrifying. Second brother Xia. Ji Bo Wen roared with rage when he saw Xia Tian self-detonate. Dying without a complete corpse. At the most crucial moment when Xia Tian self-detonated, Ji Bo Wen had dodged out of the way, allowing the sword to slash freely against his body. Blood of yellow flame was naturally unable to let him go, sticking closely to him and chasing after him. Ji Bo Wen watched the death of his brother with his own eyes, and because of the turbulent emotions in his heart, he suffered countless attacks. But in that moment, he could only cry aloud with grief, completely not caring about the injuries on his body. All of a sudden, Ji Bo Wen's body rose up like a sharp spear, as he laughed maniacally. Blood of yellow flame also cried out, flashing rapidly as blood fell from the sky like rain. An arm also fell from the sky with a loud crack. Ah! Ji Bo Wen roared with pain as he spat out a mouthful of blood. The fresh blood instantly turned into blood mist, but his body was still rushing forward. The blood of yellow flame cried out and chased closely after him. In a moment of carelessness, it had actually allowed this fellow to escape. This was a great loss of face for blood of yellow flame, and it seemed to be turning its shame into anger. Shame, a child who thought very highly of himself, was an extremely terrifying thing. Ji Bo Wen laughed madly, using all his strength to holler. Jun Moxie, since you were so merciless, this old man shall reciprocate in kind. The matters which second brother Xia hadn't been able to finish shall be completed by me. Before his voice ended, his body suddenly made a movement that defied all physical logic. From a position where he was suddenly charging upwards, he began to fall in a sideways manner. His momentum was strong and fast, like a bolt of lightning. In just an instant, hundreds of strange afterimages appeared in the sky as he dove towards Mei Shuayan, who was on the ground. Ji Bo Wen laughed maniacally, as all his energy gathered in his remaining hand. A sharp and ruthless gaze blazed in his eyes, and he did not falter as he aimed at Mei Shuayan. This palm was the culmination of all the might of a second-level Saint Monarch. In the instant the energy was gathered, even the air around it began to freeze. In that space, not even the wind could move. Mei Shuayan's hair floated up gently and began to freeze as well. Big Bear opened his mouth, wanting to roar with rage, but in that instant, he was also unable to move. It was as if everything had frozen in this space. Ji Bo Wen laughed madly, his face filled with an enjoyable rush of revenge. He wanted to have his revenge against Jun Moxie. And the best method was obviously to kill the people that mattered the most to him. He even decided that he'd self-detonate only after killing Mei Shuayan and seeing the look of rage and pain on Jun Moxie's face. To be able to see just a glimpse of the hurt he'd inflicted on Jun Moxie would be more than sufficient for Ji Bo Wen. He wouldn't ask for anything else. You hurt my brothers. So I will make you live in pain for the rest of your life. In pain and regret. Forever. As the thought flashed through his mind, the smile on Ji Bo Wen's face grew even wider. Everybody indeed only had one life. But when it was time to give that up, no one would be stingy with it. If he self-detonated at such a close distance, it was most likely the case that most of Tian Fa Xian beasts and the evil monarch Manor's high-ranking experts would die. He knew that Jun Moxie was not dead. Jun Moxie was definitely not dead. The reason was that the annoying sword was still chasing madly behind him. This sword was undoubtedly controlled by Jun Moxie since it was still flying around. It meant that Jun Moxie was definitely still alive. In other words, Xia Changtian's self-detonation probably didn't have any effect on Jun Moxie. And the realization of this caused Ji Bo Wen to be even more angry. Jun Moxie, how could you not die? Why didn't you die? You deserve to die. Ah! You are the person that should not be alive. And so, Ji Bo Wen immediately chose such a method of seeking revenge. Kill Mei Shuayan. As long as Mei Shuayan was dead, then even if Jun Moxie was not dead, he would have to live in pain worse than death for the rest of his life. Kill. Kill. As he reached within 100 zhang away from her, this was the only thought in his head. The space before his palm materialized, solidifying into a huge tangible palm. This was an all-out strike of a second-level Saint Monarch. An unstoppable strike of death. Of course, unstoppable does not mean irrepressible. In that instant, Mei Shuayan, who should have been locked in that space, suddenly exploded with strength, and the entire area began to emanate crackling sounds. Her hair once again flew in the wind, and she raised her hand, wanting to make a counterattack. That was a scene that even the experts of the three holy lands could not believe. Mei Shuayan could actually break free from the space that a Saint Monarch froze, and even manage to make a counterattack. In that case, just what kind of shocking cultivation had this Tian Fa queen reached? Wasn't she called Venerable Mei previously? What was this inconceivable thing that they were looking at? But Mei Shuayan ultimately did not complete the attack. It wasn't that she didn't have the time to, she simply did not have the need to. Because an illusory figure had already appeared in front of her, blocking the path of Ji Bo Wen. As long as this person was standing before her, Mei Shuayan believed that no powers in this world would be able to get past him to hurt her. As that person appeared, tens of black swords began to appear, shooting out in the blink of an eye. A pair of hands materialized in the air, filled with a mysterious purple mist. That strange purple chi seemed to be filled with the trace of the profound Tao of heaven and earth. The moment Gu Han saw that purple chi, his face instantly changed drastically. This kind of purple chi also seemed to contain limitless luck and opportunity. If he wanted to break through and improve further, this would most likely be an extremely crucial point. Following that, this pair of hands surged up to meet Ji Bo Wen's huge palm. It was as if a tall mountain had suddenly appeared in front of a raging tide. An earth-shattering sound rang out. The only person who could make Mei Shuayan feel so secure, and the only person who had such magical techniques, was naturally Jun Moxie. A cold and cruel gaze shone in Jun Moxie's eyes. The moment his dearest was under threat, he'd appeared, blocking before her and not budging a single step. Ji Bo Wen roared and went to meet the palm's head on. As he did that, blood spurted from his body like arrows. The black-colored shadows earlier had been 49 nether frost blades, piercing through his body. Following that, Jun Moxie's palms, which were infused with primal chaos purple chi, also slapped onto him ruthlessly. Ji Bo Wen was like a 3-year-old child who was suddenly knocked by a rampaging bull. He flew out like a rag doll, blood spewing freely from his mouth. Jun Moxie's face also turned red, and he stumbled a few steps backwards and spat out a mouthful of blood. His back bumped into Mei Shuayan, and finally, he slumped weakly to the ground. Ji Bo Wen was a Saint Monarch expert at the end of the day, and although Jun Moxie could come out victorious, it didn't mean that it came without any costs. Truthfully, after battling 2 Saint Monarchs consecutively, even the energy he'd borrowed from the Hongjun Pagoda had been exhausted. His meridians were in an even worse state, and no matter how he tried to suppress his internal injuries, he finally couldn't endure any longer. However, Jun Moxie's eyes were still staring fixedly at Jun Moxie. If the latter could still move, he would merge again with the Hongjun Pagoda, even at the risk of the destruction of his soul, to ensure that his enemy was reduced to ashes. A shrill sound rang out, and blood of yellow flame, which had been chasing behind Ji Bo Wen without slowing down, directly plunged into his back, exiting through his heart and stopping in there. The blood of yellow flame, which had been piercing with such strong momentum, was supposed to be able to stab through him directly without any obstruction. Right now, Ji Bo Wen's body could already be said to be completely without any defense. Even the 9 nether frost blades, which were far inferior to the blood of yellow flame, would be able to stab through him with ease. What more blood of yellow flame? However, the situation was simply this unbelievable. Blood of yellow flame had stabbed in with incomparable speed, but when it plunged into Ji Bo Wen's body, it actually stopped there and stuck in his muscles. This story will be continued to chapter 1191. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.